sure. That sounds good to me. Recording. Hi.
Hey,
Good morning to you.
thank you. It's afternoon here in
It
England.
is. Good afternoon to you. Halifax time, it's about 8 something in the morning. And yes, that's right. Afternoon in Blighty. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present the venerable and quite bodacious Alex Trenoweth. So what's a nice girl like you doing in a crazy job like this? Could you not have found a normal job?
Well, I do have a normal job, but I was first an astrologer. So I was an astrologer before I became a teacher. And I got into astrology in a very odd way. When I was a teenager, my mom was reading the characteristics of my star sign, which is Cancer. And, basically it sums down to being home-loving and shy. And I didn't think that suited me very well. I identified very strongly with Leo. So my birthday is July 20th. And whenever someone asked me my sign after that, I was always very quick to say I'm on the cusp of Leo. I wouldn't even acknowledge being a Cancer. And a few years later, when I was in university, a friend of mine was looking at my chart. And she said, by the way, you have a Leo moon. And which I thought, that's wonderful. And more importantly, my ruling planet is also in Leo. Mercury is my ruling planet. So right from there, that intrigued me. So I went out and bought a basic astrology book, just one of those kind of ones that you start off with. I don't remember the author. And then I moved to England, and I was listening to morning TV, and I heard Russell Grant, who's a very well-known British astrologer. He does a lot of the royal stuff. And I heard him talking about aspects, and I literally just, oh my gosh, there's someone else on this earth who speaks the language of astrology.
Wow.
And yeah, so that was an incredibly, life-changing moment because, as you know, studying astrology can be enormously isolating because we are the weirdos of the world. There's not many people that, first of all, respect astrology. I think that's first and foremost. But, secondly, take it, seriously enough to study it in depth.
It's been a frustration for me that, it's really a science. I know it's an art as well, but it has so much scientific basis to it, but it's a statistical science. And it confuses me that so many other statistical methodologies are accepted. And we're still not. It's frustrating, isn't it?
Well, we have, we dabbled with the media, the journalists, and we, let them take over and make our identity. And, we're persecuted by the church, ridiculed by science, and trivialized by the media. And, but so, when we allow the media to define us, we kind of got ourselves into trouble, I think. And I'm not down on star signs or anything like that, because that's how we engage beginners. And that's how just about everybody gets into astrology. But, it is very frustrating when, somebody either looks at you like you're a nutter, or they look at you like you're stupid. Yeah. I have a very hard time at dinner parties, because what people ask you what you do, and I tell them I'm a teacher, and that automatically gives people a little bit of a whoa, it triggers off a lot of memories, which we're going to talk about in a bit. And if they ask me what I do for fun, or what I do, when I'm not being a teacher, and I tell them I'm an astrologer, I kind of get myself off on the wrong foot. But I don't hide what I do.
That's super brave. I've got to tell you, because I've got my QTS and I've taught in England, and I just could not believe that is such a. I was going to say such a ballsy move, but ovaries are bigger than balls.
Well, when I started teaching, my first day at my first proper job, my first permanent position. My given name isn't Alex. I have another legal name that only doctors and bankers use, which I don't want to hear from either of them. And so when I asked the school, would you call me Alex? The head teacher, kind of said we'd think about it. And that evening she Googled me and came up with all my astrology stuff. And I was formally summoned into her office, and I was told in no uncertain terms that if parents complained about me being an astrologer, I could be dismissed for gross misconduct, for bringing the school into disrepute. And this really strikes me as very odd, because I think what they were worried about that I was going to do was make predictions for children, which is the supreme irony is, as a teacher, I make more predictions with grades, and I could do more damage with what I say about predictions as a teacher than I could do as an astrologer. You know, at my when I was a history teacher, I taught 480 students over a 2-week rolling rota, and I had to predict grades every half term. So we're talking 3,000 or more predictions that I made, and my predictions as a teacher can determine whether a child gets into the top set or the middle set. It could determine whether or not they get into university. I can do a lot of damage with bad predictions as a teacher.
Oh yes.
So,
yeah, you're so right.
I call that the supreme irony. So it was eventually, being banning me from something is probably a good way to tempt me into doing it. And
I'll go you.
So I had to start off being secret. I didn't have a choice. I was on, probation. That was my first year of teaching, and I started off bringing astrology into my teaching practice. I started off because we have the student's birth data. We don't have the time of birth, but we have the date of birth. And so I started off using star signs. I put all the fire signs into one section, all the earth signs into the other, air signs into the other, the water signs. And if there's any teachers listening out there, don't ever do that. It's not a great idea, because what happened was the fire signs took over, of course, and they were all sitting together, and the air signs shouted across the room at the fire signs. The water signs started holding themselves and rocking to self-soothe, and the earth signs just sat there in silent shock. So, it wasn't the best way. And eventually, being a teacher, the profession that it is, I'd only become a teacher to pay for astrology classes. And I thought, mistakenly, that I would have weekends and holidays and a glorious long summer break to study astrology.
That got blown out of the water pretty sharp, right?
I think it took one weekend before I realized that that just wasn't going to happen.
No.
But I hung in there because I do enjoy my job. I do enjoy teaching, but I got to the point where I was burned out, tired, exhausted, as all teachers get. And I was thinking, this isn't for me. I need to do something that's going to be a little less stressful. But I turned around, looked at my class, and I realized we teach children by year group. So they all have the same Jupiter sign.
Most of them, yeah.
And then I thought to myself, well, they're all going to have the same Saturn sign as well. And, it was a big revelation for me to realize, well, this creates an astrological signature. And their Jupiter and their Saturn are bouncing off of my Jupiter, my Saturn. And I have come to the realization that, Jupiter and Saturn is all we need to know for children. We don't need to know their Venus. We don't need to know their Mercury, which is for rote learning. And Mars is none of our business, but we need to focus on how they learn, which is Jupiter, how they take that leap of faith, how they find that confidence to take in what we're teaching them and actually apply it to what they need to know. And Saturn, of course, is for discipline. And, I tell every teacher who asks me about astrology and education, if you don't understand your Saturn, your students will. And they will find your weak point. My weak point, I have Saturn in Pisces. My weak point was, I struggle with organization. And I have found that to honor Saturn, I have got to be organized. I was the kind of teacher before I started using astrology that, I could turn my back for 3 seconds and my classroom would be on its ear with, untidiness. And lesson planning was a struggle. But once I started applying astrology and the principles of, how students learn, I got a lot more organized, and I really, really worked at being a time-efficient teacher.
Okay.
It improved my career immensely once I understood this and started, honoring my Saturn.
So I can't tell you what a delight it is for me to know that you're still in teaching, because, I know we can train to be better teachers, but I am of the opinion that teachers, it's an avocation. They are born, they are not made. And so for the sake of your students, I'm really pleased that you stuck it out and you're still in the system.
Yes, well, I'm a very odd teacher in that I've lasted for so long. Most teachers only last 5 years before they leave the profession. I've been in it for 20. And I'm also unusual in that when I applied to do my teacher's training, they asked me what subject I wanted to teach, and I said history. And they advised me, well, you have a journalism degree. why don't you start off teaching English and then worm your way into humanities where the history department is? And so that's what I did. And I taught secondary school, which in the UK is 11 to 18. And so those are two smart things I did as a teacher, because first of all, being an English teacher, it gave me an enormous amount of range of skills. And I did eventually work into the history department. And then when I started traveling a lot, I know we're going to talk a little bit about,
Some
my
of the
travels and things like that.
shenanigans that you've been up to.
Yeah, yeah. But when I started doing that, I left full-time teaching. I became what's called in the UK a supply teacher, or I think the US called a substitute teacher. And this just means I have a lot more control over what I teach. And so the second smart thing I did was I started off teaching secondary school so I could teach primary school, which is 3 years old to 11 years old. So, I am an enormously flexible teacher, and I have no problems getting work, and I don't have to take work if I'm traveling. If the phone rings in the morning and I'm on my way somewhere, I can just say, I'm sorry, I can't work today. I'm off to India, or I'm off to Germany, or wherever I'm going.
That is pretty lush.
I finally got to the stage in my career where I got everything just where I wanted. I got the work and life balance just where I need it to be.
So I completely understand how you're applying I see through the glass darkly. I mean, you are definitely the queen of the astrology education blend, but I think that's why you and I connected as strongly as we did. Well, maybe one of the reasons anyways is that we both had these two careers that we love both of them, but it was exciting to me to watch you put the two of them together. That was a mind-blowing thing for me. And I know that you've done more than just that. I know that you're constantly pushing back your own, as to say, the teacher keeps on learning. And I know that, and I guess this is where we're sort of sliding now from the first part of the what's a nice girl like you doing in a job like this into what shenanigans are you up to lately. I think we're kind of working our way into there. I guess the question is, tell me about India.
Wow. Okay. Well, India. I had always wanted to go to India, but it wasn't really high on my list of priorities. And when I left full-time teaching, then the reason why I had to leave was because I couldn't get time off to do two conferences. One was ISAR, which was this in 2014, and the second one was SOTA, which was 5 weeks later. So ISAR that year was in Phoenix, and SOTA that year was in Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
And I could not get, I was really going to fly out to Phoenix on a Thursday evening and come back to teach on Monday morning. And I could not get those 2 days off to do that. And then I had to beg for it, and they were willing to give it to me for ISAR. But when I asked again for SOTA, they weren't, they weren't. And my response was, well, if I'm so invaluable, maybe you should pay me more. They didn't like that very much. And I decided, wow, maybe it's time for me to break out. It was my Jupiter return. And I thought, I'm going to do something that I haven't done before. So I planned a US tour. And so once I did ISAR, I started working my way across the USA and went down to Atlanta to do some research. And then I went up to New York. So over 5 to 6 weeks, I saw a lot of things I had missed when I was living in America, because basically I'd never been to the West Coast before.
Okay.
So I hadn't seen a lot of America, actually. And when I got to my last evening, sorry, let me tell you how India came up. So I was in Texas with the Austin Astrological Society. And my friend said to me, he says, all the stuff that you do with astrology and teaching is wasted in England and the States because, when people are so anti-astrology. Why don't you consider India? So I did a little research and I came across Gopal Bhattacharjee, who back then was a complete stranger to me. And so this is 2014, and I asked him, would you consider having me speak at your conference in 2016? It took a while to get a response, but on my last night in the States, I got the invitation to come to India to speak in 2015.
Wonderful.
So, this was, it just seemed so fated to me. And then when I got to India, I'd never been to India before. It was completely, everyone's allowed to have one freak out in India, I always say, because it's such a different.
It is so different, isn't it? Crikey.
But I presented my research on astrology and education, and I ended up winning the International Astrologer of the Year 2015. Now, if you put a crown on my head and call me the International Astrologer of the Year. That's going to have a pretty big effect on someone who has Moon in Leo. And actually, I found out I'm actually a double queen in the Vedic system. I'm Rohini rising, which is the favorite wife, and Maga, which is the queen. So, that kind of suited me. But I found out my astrocartography lines. My sun runs on the MC through Calcutta. My
Perfect.
Jupiter runs on my MC through Delhi and Rishikesh. So from Calcutta, I traveled to Rishikesh. And, wouldn't you know, on my first night in an ashram, I had an out-of-body experience.
Wow.
Right? I'll just tell you a little bit about it. I was aroused enough from sleep to be aware that I was no longer in bed. I was actually rising above the bed. And I thought to I was aware that there were other beings in the room, that I was being evaluated somehow, that there was something going on, but I was just awake enough to know that this was happening. And I woke up the next morning, went to meditation, and just shaking my head, thinking, what was that about? Because I had not invited an out-of-body experience. I had not ever expected to have one. So fast forward a couple years, and I'm at the Kepler conference. And I had another really weird thing happen to me. I was not feeling very confident. I was wondering, as a teacher, I'm just a little bit too used to teaching children, not used to teaching adults. And I find adults so quiet and so, difficult to engage with. But I was feeling a distinct lack of confidence, and there's no reason for that. But I was feeling maybe the lecture circuit isn't for me. Maybe I should calm down a little bit, get back into the classroom permanently or something. And from a distance, as I left my hotel room, I saw this beautiful pink flower, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And as I passed the flower and looked at it closely, it said to me in a human voice, it hurts to blossom. And I thought to myself,
oh my God, what a powerful.
Yeah. So we never think about, the pain it takes to burst out and to become beautiful and to So from there, I thought to myself, wow, I think that's the message. I need to stay in what I'm doing, and I need to get my message out a lot more. So for the next conference, I was in Portugal, and I started looking at the astrology of those moments, the out-of-body experience, and when the flower spoke to me. And I realized, wow, it's all tying in together. And the Portugal conference was important to me too, because I made myself sit down and lecture. And because I was being translated, I had to read my lecture as well. And it just struck me that how these events are so interconnected. And I actually wrote a story, an article for Dell Horoscope about these events and how they're tied together and how they affected my chart and how it qualifies as a true mystical experience. Because we know that, well, from research that I've done and other people, we know that the septiles and quintiles are very strong and prominent in mystical experiences, and those particular aspects were present more above chance in those two incidents in my life. Okay. And it all kind of came together in Portugal, and I realized I'll be okay.
Yeah,
it's
more than
be
okay,
fine.
Girlfriend, more than okay. And what you've done, I have to, if I might reflect back to you just a little bit in terms of India and me coming sort of late to the party and your gracious invitation. In fact, I believe you nagged me. I was like, I can't do this. And I did it, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful, and I'm so grateful for the experience, and I thank you. But I'm
grateful to have you.
It was transformative for me. I went before I came to India. Someone would say, "What do you do?" I'd say, I'm a teacher, I'm a systems programmer, and I'm an astrologer, And when I left Calcutta, I would say, I'm a teacher, I'm a systems programmer, and I'm an astrologer. And it was a totally different vibe. From the time I left Calcutta, I was, I stood up tall, I found my spine. There's a Saturn word. And I was like, this is what I do.
When I was in India,
I've even put it on my CV. Like, I've carefully worded it. I've said I'm a lifelong student of astronomy and related disciplines, but it's right on my CV so that if anybody says anything, because I don't have two names, I have one name. So if people Google me, here I am, so, which was perhaps in one way dumb, but in another way, it's the satirizing. But what I wanted to say about India is how you've done something extremely profound there, because it's just like, you poked like with a tiny pin a small hole and the floodgates opened, and now there's this huge connection between the East and the West. And yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing, the difference in the way people are engaged, despite person who shall not be named trying to screw it up. It starts with the G, and I will say nothing more. But besides
we had a couple of problems. I think, like I say, everyone's allowed one freak out in India. And unfortunately, there's a couple of people that really took the freak out to the extreme.
The extreme.
When I was in India for the first time in 2015, and I saw the opening dance,
oh yeah,
I just had to bring more people. I just knew that I had to bring more people to see this. And in 2016, Gopal Bhattacharjee asked me to be his international secretary general, which seemed like a big illustrious title.
Man's not stupid.
Well, I thought it's to be my job to bring people in.
And you did it, boy. You did it in spades.
And I saw it as my duty, really, as another Saturn word, to really use my experiences speaking at international conferences to invite people to talk to people. Because I'll tell you something about it's always bothered me at conferences that Vedic and Western astrology are treated as if they are like two different things. And I just looked at that metaphorical curtain, and I thought, it's time that thing came down.
Go you.
And if you think about it, if you only live in a red room all your life, you don't understand the color blue because there's no point of comparison. Correct. But if you really think about it, you don't understand red either. And I thought to myself, there's no way that I can call myself an astrologer unless I understand everything about astrology. And I think, there's a lot of people who are very, very resistant to learning Vedic astrology, or for learning the basic principles. And, I don't know what it is about that kind of fear. Maybe it's a human thing to have a fear of the unknown. But I think that, every astrologer in the world, it's their responsibility to learn as much about astrology everywhere as they can. So my next step is I'm working on a sort of a global astrology school. I don't want to have just Western astrology. I want to have Vedic, and I want to have Chinese astrology. Good. And I want to study, local cultural things. Good. Because we have an academic course here in England for the master's degree, but that doesn't look at techniques. That just looks at, astrology in a historical context or anthropological context. I want to look at techniques. And I want to ask the big questions, tropical sidereal. Hey, let's start with that.
Well, I'm having a wonderful play, because based on what I learned in India, I'm having a great play with using some of my Western type techniques, but applying them first to the Jyotish zodiac and then to the tropical zodiac to see how they play together. And what I'm learning is it's not an or, it's an and.
Absolutely. So I had the opportunity to teach Western astrology to Vedic astrologers. These were Gopal's best students. They could speak English. And what I realized was, okay, there are some differences, but, we all are talking the same language. We're all, understand, we have similar techniques. I mean, but theirs is a lunar-based zodiac with the nakshatras, and we're solar-based with the sun. And of course, they use the whole entire sky, the stars and beyond. It's not just based on what's in the ecliptic. So there are differences. But how can an astrologer look at the Vedic system and say that's not for me, or I shouldn't be interested, or that's none of my business? It's our business as astrologers. It's a big sky. There's room enough for all of us underneath it, and we should be curious about what goes on. So I, back in 2015, watching this opening dance, that's all I could think of was I need to bring more astrologers to India. And, we need to be more open-minded and, to work towards making astrology acceptable and showing other people, non-astrologers, what astrology can really do.
Yes, which you're doing so well with education. I love it when we're able to find directly applicable modalities, because people, they don't want to study like we study. They don't want to get into the weeds. But when we're able to demonstrate a valid application of our work onto another discipline, such as you've done with teaching, I think that's where we really get some traction with the outer world.
And let me add to this as well. We need to listen to what our skeptics are saying.
Absolutely.
We need to hear what they're saying, because they have some valid points. And so another thing I do is I started engaging in statistical research. Now, this was a touchy point for me as well, because I started off my university education wanting to be a behavioral psychologist. And so I went to Western Michigan University, which has one of the top behavioral schools in the country. But when we got to the statistics, I thought to myself, really, I don't want to do this, so I could train the rats and the pigeons. But when it came to the statistics, I didn't really want it. I found it soulless. I found it, that it was just going to be something that I didn't think I was going to be able to use. And so I left. I changed my major because I didn't want to do statistics, and I was bad at it anyway. So Sam Reynolds, who's a New York astrologer, says,
we love Sam.
Be careful what you hate. And statistics came back and bit me when I was in my role as a teacher. I was in charge of pastoral care of a certain year group, and part of my duties was collecting behavior data. So the way that it worked is if a child is misbehaving, we give them a formal warning, and then if they carry on doing whatever they're doing, we write an incident sheet. And this is our behavior policy. So as this pastoral care provider, it was my job to know what was going on. So a copy of the incident sheet went on the student's file. A copy of it went to the teacher who wrote the incident sheet. A copy of it went home, and a copy of it came to me.
I remember it well.
We were having a particularly bad day, and we were just overwhelmed because we had other behavioral managers in the office, overwhelmed with behavior data. It was just a bad day. I mean, we couldn't blame the weather. So one of my colleagues, the parents don't know I'm an astrologer, but my colleagues did. My colleague looked to me from across his desk, and he says, "It must be a full moon."
Must be a full moon.
Digging at me for being an astrologer. So I thought to myself, no, actually, it's not the full moon. It's a new moon. And I thought to myself, my goodness me, wouldn't this be great if I could somehow compile all these 20,000, 40,000 incident sheets and answer that question: are children more likely to misbehave at the new moon or the full moon? So I started off with a very small sample, 3 consecutive lunar months, and I looked and I thought I had enough to go on, that it was showing that students are more likely to misbehave on the new moon. And so I crunched a few non-consecutive years, because the cohorts would be different. The year 7s that I crunched would be year 11s in the second one. And I found definitely. And
I have to say that's super good from a stats point of view. I'm proud of you, because that is so important when you're working with stats. To be clean like that is huge. So full mark.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I listened to what the skeptics are saying, and I looked at the nodal axis, and I found that they're more likely to misbehave in the new moon. It's at higher latitudes, away from the eclipses.
Isn't that interesting?
So counterintuitive on both accounts, I think. But there's no flies on me with my research. I got my statistical analysis shows that there's just significance on this. There's not chance. It's not luck. It's not bad research. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
And so, but I also have other things I found out. Looking at the Jupiter and Saturn return. Jupiter return children are more in trouble for, these are 11, 12-year-olds, are more in trouble for disruption.
Sure.
Whereas the Saturn opposition children, 14, are more in trouble for not doing enough work. So Saturn work, being a key word, Jupiter disruption, so that clearly showed as well. So there's a lot of things that I can do with this research, with this data that I have, and I have so much. So I'm looking at primary school data now, because I have access to primary school records as well. And I'm finding that I thought at first it was because of the teenage brain development that, I was seeing this effect because people are better rested on the new moon than the full moon. So I thought it had something to do with the circadian cycle. But I now that I'm looking at primary school data, I haven't quite proved this yet, but I think that it's kind of across the board that children are generally more likely to get in trouble at the new moon than the full moon. But what a use this is for teachers.
Sure.
I still envisage a lunar calendar in every staff room so people can look at it and say, oh my gosh, new moon today, we need more
Gird
staff
your
on the
loins, boys.
yeah.
Gonna be
Yes,
crazy.
exactly. And so this is where I want astrology to go towards.
Yeah.
I want it to go towards having a practical application.
Practical application.
And I want astrologers to look at what they're doing in the practice. It's wonderful having clients, but that isn't the only thing that astrology can do. I want astrology to be a part of life.
Yes.
I don't want, this thing where, astrology is on its own. I don't think astrology can work that way. I think when you start doing research, you need to triangulate. You need to look at the astrological principles, tie it into another discipline, and then look at the statistics. And that's how I've been managing my research I call it strangulation, not just triangulation. I sometimes get it mixed up because in my mind I call it strangulation because it leaves no room for argument, room for argument whatsoever. So, I would really like to see more people looking at the jobs that they do, the things that they come into contact, and analyzing their data and making it public, publishing it.
Well, any further research, please knock on my door because we've got Syzygy going out. Your paper's in it, and I hope, please God, it's going out in November. So watch for that. That's the new NCGR Research Journal.
I love the syzygy because I use that word a lot in my research paper.
Well, it wasn't my idea. It was actually Diane Tremble that came up with it, and she's the gal that did all the heavy lifting on the redesign. My God, that girl is talented, and you're gonna love it, Miss Leo Moon, because it's golds and reds and oranges.
No, fantastic!
It'll be sexy.
Oh, that's great.
So the last part of this, I guess, is really I'd like to get a sense from you as to where we're getting it right and where we're getting it wrong as astrologers in 2018 and going forward. Everyone's all like on tenterhooks about 2020, so I'd be happy if you had any view on that. I'd be happy to hear it. And also anything that I should have asked you that I failed to do so. So any question I should have asked you and that would have liked me to ask you.
Yeah, 2020 is going to be a very interesting year because I'll tell you why. It's the first time the Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions are in the air signs. We had the mutation in 1980, but it's going to be in air signs for the next 200 years at least. But the last time Saturn and Jupiter were in air signs in Aquarius was back in the 14th century when the Crusades were going on. And the Third Crusade in particular was the one that it was the Muslim leader Saladin.
I know. Good old Saladin.
When I was teaching the Crusades in history, I mentioned Saladin, and all the Muslim children knew that name. Yay! They all cried out. And we're looking at these the differences in religions and the tension that we're feeling. But I'm hoping what happens is that, like I hope for astrology, that we start tearing down that curtain and we start, looking at the world as, hey, we're not living in a kind of world where we need to be fighting. We need to be standing together. And this is what I always say about astrology as well. We cannot have the situation where we're looking at the Vedic system and saying that's incorrect. If we're going to stand up against our skeptics in astrology, then we need to stand shoulder to shoulder to endure the outrageous slings and arrows and outrageous skepticism. And that's what I'm hoping is starting to happen. And so for astrology and for the world in general, to be united, to focus on our common interests, which should be in the humankind preserving the planet, and taking better care of our children, because I think the educational system stinks. I think it's based on a really outmoded industrial age mentality.
It's 200 years out of date at this point,
It's about producing obedient, quiet workers who won't complain. And, I see myself, the reason why I keep on teaching is because I hope I can make a difference. If I keep being noisy enough, the teaching profession will listen to me as well. When I say, hey guys, the new moon is when children misbehave, or if we look at the way we fund our students, we look at the neurology of how adolescents grow up, we know that they're more likely to misbehave between the Jupiter return and the Saturn opposition. Well, shouldn't we think, my God, these children are bored? Because every teacher will tell you a naughty child's a bored child. But
Well,
what happens in England
the
is
teachers are
the
bored.
funding.
If the teachers are bored,
Yeah.
guess what? The kids are bored too.
Yeah, the funding for the educational system UK tends to go for the exam years. When it's too late, the brain development has already happened, and we need to shift it over onto creating opportunities for children. We need to understand, that look at the behavior, what it's telling us. Look at the, it's going to be a long road for me, but the astrology of what's happening, and change it. Change the way we teach our children.
Change the way we teach our children.
And don't get me started on school dinners.
Oh yeah, you and me and Jamie Oliver, mate.
Well, half a step above prison food, I think. We just do everything on the cheap in education. And I just think, why are we doing this? We spend more money putting children into prison than we do on educating them. What is going on there? Why aren't we using money to keep them out of prison in the first place?
But I think you've nailed it when you've said, I always used to joke and say there's only 3 places I know where there's 3 bathrooms. There's the boys' bathroom, the girls' bathroom, and then the staff bathroom. And it's like prisons, schools, and the army.
Right. Well,
I don't know any other places in the world where that's a thing. So that's very telling, isn't it? And you're absolutely right. It's it's not that we have to tweak the education system. We have to blow it up and organically build something new. So your wonderful insights hopefully will light a path to a better style of helping the kid grow his or her own knowledge.
Yeah, they're capitalizing on their talent.
Yes.
I don't make predictions for children using astrology. What I do is I look at what I have, and I start thinking about how I can use their Jupiter to engage them. So, for example, the new 11s coming in, they're going to have Jupiter in Sagittarius, the majority of them. So this is an energetic class. They need variety. They need, to get out of their seats. They need to be physical. And, Jupiter is going to be in rulership as well as Saturn in rulership later this year.
That's very strong.
Hasn't happened for 60 years. So, I'm really hoping that, there's going to be some changes, that we're really going to look at what we're doing. I think that's what it is, MJ. Is we're just not looking, our parents were educated the same way we were educated, and our grandparents were educated the same way, and our great-grandparents. So it's just, we're all part of the system that isn't working. And we need to look at, what isn't working and why it isn't working, and do something about it, instead of just saying, well, that worked for me when I was a kid.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. Is there anything I should have asked you that I have not asked you?
Well, I can't really think of anything. You didn't ask me about my trumpet playing.
Tell me about your trumpet playing. Oh, yes, you did. You were like in a big concert, right?
I performed at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival with my jazz band, the South London Jazz Orchestra. So I'm not so much, I'm not a soloist, but I play in the big band, and that's one of the things I do for fun. I also sing alto in the church choir.
Nice.
I do attend an Anglican church, which people find very, very amusing when they ask me, as an astrologer, as being a Christian. And I have the same exact answer, I'm a practicing Christian just as much as I'm a practicing astrologer. I'm always getting better. I'm always looking for things. But when I was baptized, I saw myself as a seeker of knowledge. And it's exactly the same thing, with with what I see for astrology is that, we need to look at it. We need to engage in it. And, I wanted to be a seeker, and I wanted to have a place where I could seek in peace. And it doesn't mean that because I'm a practicing Christian that I can't be a practicing Muslim or sympathetic to Judaism. It just means that I'm a seeker. And, I'm not one of these people that, quote the Bible, all the time,
Well,
or
it was
push it
really,
down people's
it was
faces.
Judith Hill who educated me, because I'm not Christian at all. That said, I have some of my best friends are Christian. Oh, look, here's one we prepared earlier. But she tipped me off that the Bible has many solid references to supporting
The wise men.
Well, it's in
Searching for the star.
She said it's in Genesis, apparently, where they talk about the upper and the lower firmament, and that he puts lights in the firmament for the guidance of men. Like, it's right in Genesis. And there's a few other good references as well. So astrology was never against either Judaism in terms of the Old Testament or Christianity in terms of
exactly. I did the MA. I'm my MA on this very subject.
Oh wow, cool.
About how the Bible is full of astrological references. A time for everything, a season for everything. It's all in there. And I often quote the parable about the seeds. Some seeds fall on rocky ground and get eaten by the birds. Some fall, get blown away by the wind. But some seeds find the place where they can thrive. And I think as teachers and parents, that's what we need to do for our children, is find, how the seed needs to find its roots, how it needs to be cared for. And, I think it's a very powerful verse that maybe doesn't make a direct reference to astrology, but I think it's something that I try to aspire to as a teacher and as a parent, and as somebody who really does enjoy engaging with young people, is to help them find and grow those roots.
Absolutely.
So they can,
we shouldn't be treating
so they can blossom.
That's right. We shouldn't be treating a tulip bulb the way we would treat, say, an acorn. It's okay for each seed to have what it needs to be okay.
Its own characteristics.
And you're able to describe those characteristics. Because that's the thing, is that we know a tree's a tree once it's a tree. But you're able, with your astrology, to look at the acorn and say, I know what your potential is. Let me help you get there.
Yes, and also, just going back to my flower experience, we know that it hurts to bloom, and we need to be there to be supportive, because the other thing that happens in the teenage years is that they have their Chiron square, as well as the first Ptolemaic aspect from an outer planet, Uranus, sextile Uranus, about the age of 13. The same time they have the Jupiter sextile to its natal position as well. So, there's a lot of things happening in adolescence, and we just can't look at them.
Just to put that in layman's terms, so the Chiron square is a painful experience, something that can't be fixed with a Band-Aid, right?
Oh, yes, and something that's, going to recur as well as Chiron continues to transit. And same with Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter and Saturn form the basic building blocks of development. And, when we're dealing with adults who are acting like very bad adults, we need to think about what happened, back when they were teenagers, when they were going through all these changes, because the brain development, your habits become fixed at that time. And, so that's also something that I think that we need to look at, is the Jupiter cycle. We can't just look at transits. We need to go back and look at the building blocks from childhood as well, which is something I'm going to be talking about for ESAR in their Star Club.
Yes. I'm the Canada rep now, eh?
Sorry, you're what?
I'm ESAR Canada now.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Oh, fantastic. I didn't know that. Congratulations.
Yes, it hasn't been announced yet. It's coming up. Sam's going to announce it in the next month or so.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a good choice.
Oh, well, I've got big shoes to fill. It used to be Kelly Surtez. So that's I feel like I'm in size 12 shoes, girlfriend.
Yeah. Well, Kelly's coming to India.
Kelly, oh, good.
Yeah.
It's going to be a
party.
Got a lot of
we got last time I looked, about 120 speakers.
Wonderful.
Coming. So, it's ivcconference.com if anybody wants to have a look. We need to start working as a community to get people to India.
Yes.
Which I think will be it could be challenging because I think some people are scared of India. I mean, I've asked some people about India. I get sick so easily, and I got sensitive, and they're assuming that they're going to be sick, which isn't always the case.
No, I think it's about prior planning and careful consideration, and it was such a blessing and such a joy. My only sadness was I didn't get to see her ladyship Kali in her own temple. Because you know how jam-packed we were, and I didn't want to miss any lectures. And as it was, Miss Nix, he hasn't quite forgiven me for that. So so I think that was my only sorrow, was not having extra time because of my situation before and after to be able to really enjoy this space. But the people were superb. You did a great job, Alex. It was
thank you.
It was amazing.
But then we learned a lot, I think. When the first time you do something, there's always going to be little things to sort out and a few big things to sort out. But we had to go through the experience to see what we needed to do.
Absolutely.
We learned a lot, and again, it comes from looking at what the problems were and trying to being more careful next time.
Yeah.
So as you said, seeing Kali Temple, it's an important thing. It's very hectic there.
I bet it is. Yeah, that's her home turf, right? Kolkata.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So the last time I was in India, I got to do a tour. I did the Golden Triangle and I did Varanasi. So I went to, I saw Taj Mahal, and you know how when you go to places, they're always a little bit disappointing. You go to Disneyland, it's not quite what you think it's going to be. It's not that way with the Taj Mahal. Because you can't see it until you come through the archway.
Oh wow!
And when I saw it, I mean, I nearly fell on my knees. It was so beautiful. I mean, you can't say that the Taj Mahal is disappointing. And it was just absolutely beautiful. And the more close you get to it, the more beautiful it is because it's intricate. Marble carvings, and it was just something that I was so grateful to have the opportunity to see, and to see the Arti in Varanasi. Wow. Delhi, to see the Hanuman temple, Jai Hanuman.
And sure, monkey god, right?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. My favorite.
Well, he's got a Mercury kind of thing going on, and if that's your ruler, that works out.
Yeah.
I am going to love you and leave you. I thank you very much for taking the time. I know, darling, that you're in demand. How many radio interviews is this in a week? Is it 4? Something crazy like that?
4 radio interviews. And I have clients, and I'm going to be teaching. So yeah, it's a busy week. But
thank you for fitting us in here at CKDU. We're always delighted, and I'm certain this will not be your last time on the show. So I'm very grateful, and I can't wait to. If I don't see you before, I can't wait to see you back in Kolkata in 2020.
I think you're going to see me around. I'm going to be coming back to the States next year at some point.
It's just I'm having a 9th house perfection year, so maybe I'll get lucky and get on an airplane. You never know. Although we're terrified to cross the border right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, my mom is Canadian. I don't know if you know this. She's from the Saugeen Indian Reservation. So I know.
You should get your passport, girlfriend. Do you have a Canadian passport?
No, I have an Indian band card that says I'm a...
But then you best get the Canadian passport, girl. We'd love to have you. Come play at our house. Come play at our house. Anyway, so I'll say goodbye. Canada. Okay, just a second.